Sometimes, a single decision changes your entire life. Sometimes, all it takes is staying honest when nobody is watching. Joseph Novak has worked as a janitor at an old school in Brno for 30 years. Every evening, he cleans empty classrooms. His work is not glamorous. One cold November evening, he finds a wallet under a desk. There is more money inside than Joseph earns in an entire year. There are also documents and business cards. Nobody sees him. Nobody would ever know. He could keep the money. He could solve all his problems. But Joseph does what is right. He decides to return the wallet. He has no idea who it belongs to. And he has absolutely no idea how much this decision will change his life. Tell us in the comments what you would do, and give us a like if you believe in honesty, because tomorrow we are bringing a story that will move you even more. Sometimes a single decision changes your entire life. Sometimes all it takes is staying honest when nobody is watching. Joseph Novak has worked as a janitor at an old school in Brno for 30 years. Every evening he cleans empty classrooms. His work is not glamorous. One cold November evening, he finds a wallet under a desk. There is more money inside than Joseph earns in an entire year. There are also documents and business cards. Nobody sees him. Nobody would ever know. He could keep the money. He could solve all his problems. But Joseph does what is right. He decides to return the wallet. He has no idea who it belongs to. And he has absolutely no idea how much this decision will change his life. Tell us in the comments what you would do, and give us a like if you believe in honesty, because tomorrow we are bringing a story that will move you even more. The corridors of the old school building stretched long and silent in the evening darkness, lit only by the pale yellow glow of overhead lights that flickered occasionally, reminding Joseph Novak of fireflies he used to chase as a boy in the countryside. He pushed his cleaning cart slowly down the hallway, the wheels squeaking softly against the worn linoleum floor that had seen thousands of students walk across it over the decades. Joseph was 62 years old, his hair silver-gray and thinning, his hands rough and calloused from years of hard work. But his eyes still held a gentle warmth that made the students smile when they passed him in the morning. He wore his navy blue janitor uniform with quiet dignity. The fabric faded from countless washings, a small name tag pinned to his chest that simply read, Joseph. This school had been his world for 3 decades, every classroom a familiar friend, every corner a place where memories lived and breathed. He knew which door hinges needed oil, which windows stuck in the winter, which tiles were loose in the 3rd floor bathroom. He knew the smell of chalk dust mixed with floor wax, the sound of his own footsteps echoing in empty halls after everyone had gone home. The particular way afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows in the main corridor, casting long shadows that danced and shifted as the day faded into evening. Joseph had started working here when he was 32, a young man with a wife and a small daughter, full of dreams and hopes for a better future. His wife, Maria, had been his whole world, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle laugh that could brighten even the darkest days. She used to pack him lunch every morning, wrapping sandwiches carefully in wax paper, adding a small note with words of encouragement or a simple drawing of a heart. Those were good years, simple years. Years when happiness was measured not in money, but in shared moments around the dinner table, in Sunday walks through the park, in the sound of their daughter Petra laughing as she played in their small garden. But life has a way of teaching hard lessons. Maria had died 5 years ago, taken by cancer that came suddenly and mercilessly, leaving Joseph alone in their small apartment with only memories and photographs to keep him company. He kept her picture on his nightstand, her face forever young and smiling, frozen in a moment of joy from a summer vacation they had taken to the mountains 20 years before. Every morning he would look at that picture and whisper good morning to her, and every night he would tell her about his day, speaking softly to the empty room as if she could still hear him. Petra was now 34, a strong woman who had inherited her mother's kindness and her father's stubborn determination. But life had not been easy for her either. She had married young, a man who seemed promising, but turned out to be unreliable, leaving her alone with a daughter of her own, little Carolina, who was now 8 years old and the light of Joseph's life. Petra worked 2 jobs to support them, one at a grocery store during the day and another cleaning offices at night, barely making enough to pay rent and put food on the table. Joseph helped as much as he could from his modest salary, giving Petra money whenever he had anything left after paying his own bills, going without new clothes or small pleasures so his daughter and granddaughter could have a little more. But recently, things had gotten worse. Petra had been sick, complaining of headaches and dizziness, losing weight rapidly, her face growing pale and drawn. The doctors had run tests, expensive tests that insurance only partially covered, and the results had been troubling. They suspected something serious, something that would require treatment, possibly surgery, definitely money that neither Petra nor Joseph had. The worry kept Joseph awake at night, lying in his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, calculating numbers in his head that never added up to enough, praying to a God he was not sure was listening anymore. His salary as a janitor was small, barely enough to cover his own rent and utilities, leaving little for anything else. He lived in a tiny apartment on the 4th floor of an old building without an elevator, 3 rooms that held a lifetime of modest possessions, furniture that had been old when he bought it second-hand, walls that needed paint, a kitchen with appliances that worked but looked tired, a bathroom where the pipes groaned and rattled every time he turned on the water. But it was home, and Joseph kept it clean and organized, taking pride in the small space, even if it was nothing fancy. He owned 1 good suit that he wore to church on Sundays, a few work uniforms, some casual clothes for his days off, all of them old, but clean and mended carefully whenever they tore. He cooked simple meals, soups and stews that could stretch for several days, bread from the bakery down the street that sold day-old loaves at half price, tea instead of coffee because it was cheaper. He walked to work every day, a 40-minute journey each way, saving money on bus fare, enjoying the exercise even when the weather was bad. His pleasures were few but meaningful, a book borrowed from the library, a Sunday afternoon with Petra and Carolina at the park, feeding ducks by the pond, watching his granddaughter run and laugh, her joy temporarily making him forget his worries. At work, Joseph was known as reliable, quiet, thorough. He took his job seriously, arriving exactly on time every day, never calling in sick, never complaining about the work, even when it was difficult or unpleasant. The teachers and staff treated him kindly, greeting him by name, asking about his family, thanking him when he did something extra like fixing a broken shelf or carrying heavy boxes. There was Mrs. Svobodova, another cleaning lady who had worked at the school for 15 years, a plump woman with a quick laugh and a love for gossip, who often shared her lunch with Joseph and told him stories about her 6 grandchildren. There was Mr. Hlavacek, the building superintendent, a tall man with a stern face but a good heart, who respected Joseph's work ethic and sometimes gave him small bonuses from the maintenance budget when he did repairs beyond his normal duties. These people were Joseph's community, his extended family, the human connections that made his days bearable and sometimes even pleasant. The school itself was a beautiful old building, constructed in the early 1900s, with high ceilings, tall windows, decorative molding, and wooden staircases that creaked underfoot. The classrooms still had original blackboards, wooden desks scarred with generations of carved initials, floors that bore the marks of countless feet. Joseph loved this building, its history, its character, the way it seemed to hold within its walls all the dreams and hopes of the children who had studied here. He treated it with respect, cleaning carefully, noticing small details that others might miss, taking satisfaction in making everything neat and orderly. His father had taught him the value of honest work. Joseph remembered his father clearly, a farmer who worked the land, with his own hands, who taught his son that a man's worth was not measured by what he owned, but by his character, by whether he kept his word, by whether he did right even when it was difficult. His father had given him a small pocket knife when Joseph turned 16, a simple tool with a worn wooden handle, telling him that this knife had been in their family for 3 generations, that it represented their values, honesty, hard work, perseverance. Joseph still carried that knife in his pocket every day, a tangible connection to his father who had been gone now for 20 years, a reminder of the lessons that had shaped his life. "Do right even when nobody is watching," his father used to say. "Your character is what you do when you think no one will ever know." These words echoed in Joseph's mind often, guiding his choices, keeping him on a path that was not always easy, but was always honest. He had never stolen anything in his life, never lied to gain advantage, never taken shortcuts that might compromise his integrity. This was who he was, who his father had raised him to be. And even now, when money was desperately tight and worry about Petra gnawed at him constantly, Joseph remained true to these principles. Some nights after work, he would sit in his small apartment, heating up leftover soup, eating alone at his kitchen table, looking at the bills stacked in a neat pile, calculating again and again, trying to find a way to make the numbers work. He would think about Maria, about what she would say if she were still here, how she would comfort him with her gentle optimism, how she would find hope even in difficult circumstances. He missed her desperately, missed having someone to share his burdens with, missed the simple comfort of another person's presence. But he endured, because that is what you do. You endure, you keep going, you take care of your responsibilities, you do what needs to be done even when you are tired and worried and alone. This was Joseph Novak's life on that cold November evening when he found the wallet. A simple life, a hard life, a life of modest means and constant worry, but also a life lived with dignity and honor. He was nobody special in the world's eyes, just an old janitor cleaning classrooms after school, invisible to most people, easily overlooked and often forgotten. But he carried within him something that money could not buy, a quality that had become increasingly rare in the modern world, an unshakable commitment to doing what was right, regardless of the cost. He did not know it yet, but this quality was about to change everything. It was nearly 8 o'clock when Joseph reached classroom 312 on the 3rd floor. Pushing his cart through the doorway and flipping on the lights with the back of his hand, as he had done thousands of times before. The fluorescent tubes flickered to life with their familiar buzz, casting harsh white light across rows of empty desks. This was the senior classroom, where students prepared for their final exams, where dreams of university and future careers filled young minds with hope and anxiety in equal measure. Joseph began his routine, emptying the waste bin near the teacher's desk, wiping down the blackboard with a damp cloth, erasing equations and vocabulary words that would be forgotten by tomorrow, sweeping the floor with slow, methodical strokes of his broom. He worked quietly, humming an old folk song under his breath, the same melody his mother used to sing when he was a child, a simple tune that brought comfort in its familiarity. He was nearly finished when he noticed something under one of the desks in the back row, a dark shape that did not belong there, something that had been overlooked or dropped, left behind when the students rushed out at the end of the day. Joseph bent down slowly, his knees protesting with small pops and creaks that reminded him he was not young anymore, reaching under the desk to retrieve the object. It was a wallet, black leather, expensive-looking, the kind that spoke of quality and money. He straightened up, holding it in his rough hands, feeling the weight of it, the soft texture of fine material that he had never owned himself. For a moment, he simply stood there in the empty classroom, alone with this discovery, the overhead lights humming their steady song, the shadows sharp and still around him. He should open it, he thought, see if there was identification inside, some way to determine who had lost it, some way to return it to its rightful owner. Joseph walked slowly to the teacher's desk and sat down in the worn wooden chair, placing the wallet on the desk in front of him. His heart was beating a little faster now, though he could not quite say why. Perhaps because finding something valuable always brought a small thrill of excitement, or perhaps because some part of him already sensed that this moment was different, that this discovery would matter in ways he could not yet imagine. He opened the wallet carefully, as if it might break or disappear if handled roughly. The first thing he saw was money, lots of it, bills neatly organized in the main compartment, crisp banknotes that looked freshly withdrawn from a bank. Joseph's breath caught in his throat. He pulled out the bills with trembling fingers and counted them slowly, once, then again, to make sure he had not made a mistake. 150,000 crowns. More money than he earned in an entire year of hard work. More money than he had ever held in his hands at one time in his entire life. His mind went blank for a moment, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what he was holding, by the possibilities that this money represented. He thought of Petra immediately, of her pale face and worried eyes, of the medical bills that were piling up, of the treatments she needed that they could not afford. This money could change everything. This money could save her life. He sat very still, the bills spread out on the desk, before him, his hands resting flat. On either side of them, his breathing shallow and quick. Nobody had seen him find the wallet. Nobody knew it was here. The classroom was empty, the hallway outside silent. The entire floor deserted at this hour. He could put this money in his pocket right now, throw the empty wallet in the trash, go home and tell Petra that their prayers had been answered, that somehow he had found a way to help her, that everything was going to be all right. Who would ever know? Who would ever be able to prove anything? The wallet had been carelessly left behind, abandoned, with the man he had tried to be his entire life. Finders, keepers, as children said. He heard his father's
Surely
voice
anyone
in his
else
memory,
would do the same
clear
thing in
and
his
strong,
position.
despite the decades
Surely this
that
was
had passed
just luck
since his
fortune.
death. Fate giving
Your
him a
character
chance
is
to help
what you
his
do
family
when you think
when
no
they
one will ever
desperately
know.
needed it. Do right.
But even as these
thoughts
thoughts
raced through his
nobody
mind,
is watching.
Joseph felt a cold
Joseph closed
weight
his eyes
settling
and
into
took
his
a
stomach,
deep breath,
a heaviness
letting it out
that had
slowly.
nothing to do with the wallet,
feeling the moment
and everything to do with who he was,
him.
with the values
This
his
was a
father had
test.
taught him. He realized, the kind of test that defines a person, that reveals what you are truly made of when the stakes are high and the temptation is strong. He could take this money and solve his problems, but he would have to live with himself afterward, would have to look at his reflection in the mirror every morning, knowing he was a thief, would have to carry the guilt and shame for the rest of his life. Could he do that? Could he betray everything his father had taught him, everything he had tried to teach Petra and Carolina? Could he steal from another person, even a person who seemed wealthy enough not to miss it, even when his own family was suffering? The answer came to him quietly, but with absolute certainty. No, he could not. He would not. Whatever else happened, whatever hardships he and Petra faced, he would not become a thief. He would not abandon his principles when they were tested. He would do what was right, even though it was hard, even though it hurt, even though nobody would ever know if he made a different choice. Joseph opened his eyes and carefully placed the money back into the wallet. His hands steady now, his decision made. He looked through the rest of the wallet's contents, searching for identification, for some clue about who owned it. There were credit cards, several of them, bearing the name Martin Dvorak. There was a driver's license with a photograph of a man in his early 50s, handsome and confident-looking, with dark hair graying at the temples and intelligent eyes. There were business cards, crisp and professional, identifying Martin Dvorak as director of Dvorak Construction, one of the largest building companies in the region. There was a photograph tucked into one of the card slots, showing a family. A man who must be Dvorak, a beautiful woman who was probably his wife, 2 teenage children smiling at the camera. A family, Joseph thought. This man has a family. People who love him. A life that matters. This wallet might not mean much to him financially, given the expensive clothes he wore in the photograph and the title on his business cards, but it surely contained things that were important. Identification that would be difficult to replace. Credit cards, photographs, personal items. Losing it would be an inconvenience at the very least, possibly worse. Joseph pulled out one of the business cards and studied it. There was a phone number printed beneath the company name, an office number presumably. He could call tomorrow, explain that he had found the wallet, arrange to return it. It was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. He placed the wallet carefully in his cart, covering it with a cleaning cloth so it would not be visible if anyone happened to walk by, and finished cleaning the classroom. But his hands moved automatically now, his mind elsewhere, already thinking about the phone call he would make, wondering what this Martin Dvorak would say, whether he would be grateful or indifferent, whether he would offer a reward. Joseph did not want a reward. He just wanted to do the right thing and move on with his life. But as he pushed his cart out of the classroom and turned off the lights, leaving the room in darkness once more, he could not shake the strange feeling that this moment had changed something fundamental, that his life would somehow be different from this point forward, though he could not have explained why he felt this way, or what he thought might happen. He only knew that finding the wallet had tested him in a way he had not been tested in years, and he had passed that test, had remained true to himself and his values, Whatever came next, he would face it, knowing he had done right. That would have to be enough. Joseph barely slept that night, tossing and turning in his narrow bed, his mind replaying the moment of finding the wallet over and over again, questioning his decision, even though he knew in his heart it was the right one. At 3 a.m, he got up and made himself tea, sitting at his small kitchen table in the darkness, sipping the hot liquid slowly, feeling its warmth spread through his chest. The wallet sat on the table in front of him, a silent presence that seemed to fill the entire room. He had brought it home rather than leaving it at the school, worried that someone else might find it and not be as honest, wanting to keep it safe until he could return it properly. He opened it again in the dim light from the street lamp outside his window, looking at the money that could solve so many problems, looking at the photograph of Martin Dvorak's family, studying their faces, their smiles, their obvious happiness. They looked like good people, he thought. They looked like the kind of family that belonged in a different world than his, a world of comfort and security, of nice houses and new cars, of vacations and restaurants and all the things that Joseph had never been able to afford. But they were still people, still human beings with feelings and concerns, still a family that mattered. The money belonged to them, not to him, and returning it was simply the decent thing to do. At 7 a.m, after a breakfast of bread and butter that he barely tasted, Joseph picked up his old telephone and dialed the number from the business card. His hands were shaking slightly as he held the receiver to his ear, listening to the ringing on the other end, rehearsing in his mind what he would say. The phone rang 4 times before someone answered, a woman's voice, young and professional, speaking quickly. Dvorak Construction. How may I help you? Joseph cleared his throat nervously. Good morning, he said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. My name is Joseph Novak. I work as a janitor at the secondary school on Masarykova Street. Last night I found a wallet belonging to Martin Dvorak. I would like to return it to him. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a moment of silence that stretched just long enough to make Joseph wonder if the connection had been lost. Then the woman spoke again, her tone different now, confused, perhaps suspicious. You found Mr. Dvorak's wallet? Yes, Joseph said simply. In one of the classrooms. He must have dropped it when he was visiting the school. There is money in it and identification. I want to return it. Another pause, longer this time. Joseph could hear the woman breathing, could sense her uncertainty, her struggle to process this information. Finally she spoke. Please hold for a moment, Mr. Novak. Joseph waited, his heart beating faster now, wondering if he had made a mistake calling, wondering if they would think he had stolen the wallet instead of found it, if they would accuse him of taking money from it, if this simple act of honesty was going to somehow become complicated and difficult. But he had done nothing wrong, he reminded himself. He was trying to do the right thing. That had to count for something. The woman came back on the line, her voice warmer now, almost breathless with surprise. Mr. Novak, Mr. Dvorak has been looking everywhere for that wallet. He thought he lost it at a restaurant yesterday. He will be so relieved. Can you bring it to our office today? Joseph felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. Going to an office building in the city center, walking into a place where successful business people worked, facing this wealthy man whose wallet he had found, all of it made him deeply uncomfortable. He was just a janitor, a simple working man in old clothes, and he would be walking into a world where he did not belong. But he had committed to this course of action, and he would see it through. "Yes," he said quietly. "I can come this afternoon, after my shift ends at the school." "That would be wonderful," the woman said, her enthusiasm palpable now. "Come to the main office at 3 o'clock. I will tell Mr. Dvorak you are coming. He will want to thank you personally." Joseph hung up the phone and sat very still for a long moment, processing what he had just done, what he had set in motion. He would meet Martin Dvorak this afternoon. He would return the wallet and then go home, and that would be the end of it. Simple, straightforward, nothing to worry about. But he felt worried anyway, felt nervous in a way that he could not quite explain. That evening, Joseph told Petra about the wallet over dinner at her small apartment, describing how he had found it, how much money was inside, how he had decided to return it. Petra listened in silence, her thin face expressionless, her food barely touched on the plate in front of her. When he finished talking, she looked at him with eyes that held both love and frustration. "Papa," she said softly, "that money could have paid for my treatment. We could have used it." "I know," Joseph said, his voice gentle but firm. "But it was not ours to use. It belonged to someone else." Petra shook her head slowly, a sad smile touching her lips. "You are too good, Papa. Too honest. The world does not reward people like you." "Maybe not," Joseph admitted. "But I have to live with myself. I have to be able to look at you and Carolina and know that I taught you the right values, that I showed you by example how to live with honor." "You can teach us those things without being poor," Petra said quietly. "Sometimes I wish you would think about yourself, about us, before you think about being honorable." Joseph reached across the table and took his daughter's hand, feeling how thin it had become, how fragile she seemed. "I am thinking about you," he said. "I am always thinking about you. But if I had taken that money, I would have been stealing. I would have become a thief. Is that what you want me to be?" "Of course not," Petra whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I just want you to have an easier life, Papa. You have worked so hard for so long, and you have so little to show for it." Joseph squeezed her hand gently. "I have you," he said. "I have Carolina. I have my health and my dignity and my clear conscience. That is more than many people have. That is enough." They sat together in silence for a while, the dinner growing cold between them, the apartment quiet except for the sound of Carolina playing in the next room, her child's laughter a bright note in the dimness. Joseph thought about the meeting tomorrow, about facing Martin Dvorak, about what he would say and how the man would react. He had no expectations, wanted nothing except to discharge his duty and move on with his life. But something in the back of his mind whispered that this was not quite true, that some small part of him hoped for recognition, for acknowledgement that what he was doing was extraordinary, in a world where honesty had become rare, and people too often chose the easy path over the right one. He pushed these thoughts away, ashamed of them, reminding himself that you do not do the right thing for praise or reward. You do it because it is right, because it is who you are. The next morning, Joseph woke early and spent extra time preparing for the afternoon meeting. He ironed his one good shirt, the white one he wore to church, making sure it was crisp and neat. He polished his old black shoes until they shone as best they could, given their age and wear. He showered and shaved carefully, trimming his moustache, combing his grey hair back from his forehead. When he looked at himself in the small bathroom mirror, he saw an old man trying to look presentable, trying to appear dignified despite his shabby clothes and worn face. It would have to do. He was who he was, and he could not change that for anyone. The tram ride into the city centre took 40 minutes, and Joseph spent the entire journey clutching the wallet in his jacket pocket, watching the streets pass by through smudged windows, feeling increasingly out of place as the neighborhoods changed from working class to affluent, from simple apartment blocks to elegant buildings with ornate facades and well-maintained gardens. He got off at the main square and walked 3 blocks to the address on the business card, his shoes clicking against the cobblestone streets, his heart beating faster with each step. The building that housed Dvorak Construction was modern and impressive, all glass and steel rising 8 stories into the grey November sky. Joseph stood outside for a moment, looking up at it, feeling very small and insignificant. The lobby was even more intimidating, with marble floors that gleamed under bright lights, leather furniture arranged in seating areas, abstract art hanging on white walls, well-dressed people moving purposefully across the space, everyone looking busy and important. Joseph approached the reception desk hesitantly, where a young woman with perfect makeup and styled hair looked up at him with a polite but distant smile. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone professional but cool, her eyes taking in his old jacket and worn shoes, clearly categorizing him as someone who did not belong here. "I have an appointment with Mr. Dvorak," Joseph said quietly, his voice sounding rough and uncertain in this polished environment. "My name is Joseph Novak." The receptionist checked her computer screen, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Novak," she said, her manner warming slightly. "Mr. Dvorak is expecting you. Please take a seat, and someone will come for you shortly." Joseph sat in one of the leather chairs, perched on the edge of it, afraid to lean back and get comfortable, feeling the wallet heavy in his pocket. Around him, people came and went, all of them looking confident and successful, all of them belonging to a world that Joseph had only seen from the outside. He watched them and felt invisible, just another old man in shabby clothes, easily overlooked, quickly forgotten. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Joseph waited patiently, used to waiting, used to being of low priority in other people's schedules. He did not mind. He had nowhere else to be, nothing pressing to do. He simply sat and watched and thought about how different his life might have been if he had made different choices, if he had been smarter or luckier or more ambitious. But these were old thoughts, worn smooth by years of repetition, and they brought neither regret nor bitterness anymore, just a quiet acceptance of what was. Finally, a door opened and a woman emerged, the same one who had answered his phone call, young and efficient-looking in a dark suit. "Mr. Novak," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I am Helena, Mr. Dvorak's assistant. Thank you so much for coming. Please follow me." Joseph stood and shook her hand, his rough palm against her soft one, following her through a doorway and down a corridor lined with offices, their glass walls revealing people working at computers, talking on phones, studying documents spread across conference tables. Everything here spoke of success and prosperity, of a kind of life that Joseph could barely imagine. They reached an office at the end of the corridor, larger than the others, with a view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Helena knocked once and opened the door. "Mr. Novak is here," she announced, stepping aside to let Joseph enter. The man behind the desk rose immediately, and Joseph recognized him from the photograph in the wallet. Though in person, Martin Dvorak was somehow more imposing, taller and broader than Joseph had expected, with an air of authority that came from years of making decisions and commanding respect. He wore an offensive suit, dark blue with subtle pinstripes, a crisp white shirt, a silk tie. On his left hand gleamed a gold ring that probably cost more than Joseph earned in several months. But his face was open and friendly, his eyes curious, as he extended his hand across the desk. "Mr. Novak," he said, his voice deep and confident, "I cannot tell you how grateful I am. Please sit down." Joseph shook his hand, feeling the firm grip, the smooth skin of someone who did not do manual labor, and sat in the chair across from the desk, pulling the wallet from his pocket and placing it on the desk between them. "I found this last night," he said simply, "while cleaning one of the classrooms. I wanted to return it to you." Dvorak picked up the wallet and opened it, checking the contents, his expression unreadable. "Everything is here," he said, looking up at Joseph with something like wonder in his eyes. "All the money, all the cards, everything." "You did not take anything?" Joseph shook his head. "It is not mine to take." Dvorak leaned back, in his chair, studying Joseph intently, his gaze penetrating, but not unkind. "Do you know how rare that is, Mr. Novak? Most people would have kept the money. Many would have taken it and thrown the rest away. You could have done that, and I never would have known." "I would know," Joseph said quietly. "That is what matters." Dvorak was silent for a long moment, still studying Joseph's face, as if trying to understand something that puzzled him. "May I ask you a personal question, Mr. Novak?" Joseph nodded, uncomfortable but willing. "How much do you earn as a janitor?" Joseph named his monthly salary, a number that sounded even smaller spoken aloud in this luxurious office. Dvorak's expression shifted, something like pain crossing his face. "And you found a wallet with 150,000 crowns, Joseph said. "Enough to change my life, yes. But it was not mine. It belonged to you." "Why?" Dvorak asked, leaning forward, his elbows on the desk, his eyes locked on Josephus. "Why did you return it? Why not keep it and solve your problems?" "Because my father taught me that a man's character is what he does when no one is watching," Joseph said. "Because I have a daughter and a granddaughter, and I want them to know that honesty matters, that doing the right thing matters, even when it is hard, even when it costs you something. Because I could not look at myself in the mirror if I became a thief." Dvorak sat back again, shaking his head slowly, a strange expression on his face that Joseph could not quite read, something between admiration and sadness. "You are a better man than most, Mr. Novak. Including me, I think." Joseph felt uncomfortable with this praise. "I am just a simple man trying to live honestly. That is all." Dvorak opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a checkbook. "Please," he said, "let me give you a reward. You deserve it." Joseph raised his hand, shaking his head. "No, thank you. I do not want a reward. I just wanted to do what was right." "But you need money," Dvorak said gently. "You told me your salary. I know that life must be difficult for you. Please let me help." Joseph stood up, feeling suddenly that he needed to leave, that this conversation was becoming something he had not anticipated, something that made him feel exposed and vulnerable. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Dvorak, but I cannot accept. What I did was not extraordinary. It was simply decent. It was what anyone should do." Dvorak stood as well, coming around the desk. "At least tell me about yourself," he said, "about your life, your family." Joseph hesitated, wanting to leave, but also touched by the genuine interest in Dvorak's voice. "There is not much to tell," he said. "I am a widower. My wife died 5 years ago. I have a daughter, Petra, and a granddaughter, Carolina. I work at the school, and I try to help my family as much as I can. That is my life." "Is your daughter well?" Dvorak asked. Joseph's face must have betrayed something because Dvorak's expression immediately became concerned. "She is sick, Joseph," admitted quietly. "The doctors are running tests. We do not know yet how serious it is, but the tests alone are expensive." Dvorak was quiet for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. "Mr. Novak," he said finally, "I will not forget what you did. I promise you that. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Do you understand?" Joseph nodded, not trusting himself to speak, feeling unexpected emotion rising in his throat. They shook hands again, and Joseph left the office, walking back through the corridors, through the lobby, out into the cold November air. He felt strange, shaken in a way he could not explain, as if something had shifted in his world, as if this meeting had been more significant than just returning a lost wallet. He walked to the tram stop slowly, his mind full of the conversation, of Dvorak's words, of the way the successful businessman had looked at him with something like respect. Nobody had looked at Joseph that way in a very long time. Life returned to normal after the meeting with Dvorak, or at least it seemed to on the surface. Joseph went back to his routine at the school, pushing his cleaning cart through familiar hallways, emptying trash bins, mopping floors, wiping down blackboards. The days blended together in their predictable patterns, morning arriving with the alarm clock, work filling the hours, evening bringing its quiet solitude in his small apartment. He did not think about the wallet much anymore, or about Martin Dvorak, or about the strange conversation in that luxurious office. It had been a brief intersection of 2 very different worlds, nothing more. And now each man had returned to his own life. Or so Joseph thought. 1 week after the meeting, on a grey Monday morning when frost covered the windows and his breath made clouds in the cold air, Joseph arrived at work to find an envelope waiting for him in his small locker in the basement janitor's room. His name was written on it in elegant handwriting, the letters precise and careful. Joseph opened it with fingers stiff from the cold, pulling out a folded letter and something else, something that made his heart stop for a moment. It was a check made out to him, signed by Martin Dvorak, for 10,000 crowns. The letter was brief but warm. "Dear Mr. Novak, I know you said you did not want a reward, but please accept this small token of my gratitude. What you did was extraordinary, whether you believe it or not. You have reminded me that there are still good people in this world, people with integrity and honor. I hope this money can help with your daughter's medical expenses. If you need anything else, please do not hesitate to contact me. With sincere thanks and respect, Martin Dvorak." Joseph read the letter 3 times, his eyes blurring with tears he tried to blink away. 10,000 crowns. It was not enough to solve all of Petra's problems, not nearly enough for the treatment she might need, but it was enough to pay for the tests, enough to ease the immediate financial pressure, enough to give them a little breathing room. He sat down heavily on the wooden bench in the locker room, the letter trembling in his hands, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness, by the fact that this wealthy businessman had remembered him, had cared enough to help. Joseph had done nothing to deserve this, except return what was rightfully someone else's, had simply acted with basic decency, and yet Dvorak had seen fit to reward him anyway. It was more than Joseph had dared hope for, more than he felt he deserved. That evening, he took the tram to Petra's apartment, arriving just as she was putting Karolina to bed. He waited until his granddaughter was asleep, then showed Petra the letter and the check, watching her face as she read, seeing the disbelief and then the joy that lit her eyes. "Papa," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. This is wonderful. This is an answer to prayer. We can pay for the tests now. We can find out what is wrong and start treatment." Joseph held his daughter while she cried, feeling her thin shoulders shake under his hands, feeling his own tears hot on his face. For the first time in months, he felt something that had been absent from his life for so long he had almost forgotten what it felt like. Hope, real hope that things might get better, that Petra might be helped, that they might find a way through this dark time. The next day, Joseph went to the bank and cashed the check, then took the money directly to the hospital billing office, paying down Petra's account, scheduling the additional tests the doctors had recommended, but that they had been unable to afford. The woman behind the counter, a tired-looking middle-aged clerk who usually treated patients and their families with bureaucratic indifference, actually smiled at him when she saw the payment. "This will help your daughter very much," she said kindly. "The doctors can move forward now with a proper diagnosis." Joseph walked out of the hospital feeling lighter than he had in years, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He wanted to thank Dvorak, to express his gratitude properly, but he was not good with words, had never been able to articulate his feelings eloquently. Instead, he sat down at his kitchen table that evening with a pen and paper, writing slowly and carefully, crossing out words and starting over, trying to capture what he felt. "Dear Mr. Dvorak," he wrote finally, after many false starts, "I do not have the words to properly thank you for your generous gift. You have given me more than money. You have given me hope for my daughter's recovery. You have shown me that kindness and compassion still exist in this world. I will never forget what you have done for my family. You are a good man, Mr. Dvorak, and I am honored to have met you. If there is ever anything I can do for you, any way I can repay this kindness, please let me know. With deepest gratitude and respect, Joseph Novak." He mailed the letter the next day, not expecting a response, feeling that he had discharged his duty to acknowledge the gift properly. But 3 days later, another envelope arrived at the school, again with his name written in that elegant handwriting. Joseph opened it in the janitor's room during his lunch break, pulling out a brief note. "Mr. Novak, your letter touched me deeply. You owe me nothing. What you did for me, returning my wallet when you could have kept it, was worth far more than 10,000 crowns. But I would like to ask you something. Would you be willing to meet me for coffee sometime? I would very much like to talk with you again. You are a remarkable person, and I would consider it a privilege to know you better. Please call my office, and we can arrange a time. Sincerely, Martin Dvorak." Joseph read the note twice, confused and a little frightened by this unexpected development. Why would a successful businessman want to have coffee with an old janitor? What could they possibly have to talk about? They came from completely different worlds, had nothing in common except a brief encounter over a lost wallet. But the note was friendly and genuine, not patronizing or pitying, and Joseph felt he could not refuse without being rude. Mrs. Svobodova found him in the hallway that afternoon, noticed his distracted expression. "Everything all right, Joseph?" she asked, her round face concerned. "You look troubled." Joseph told her about the wallet, about Dvorak, about the check, and now this invitation for coffee. He expected her to be surprised, perhaps to warn him to be careful, but instead she smiled broadly, her eyes crinkling with pleasure. "This is wonderful, Joseph," she exclaimed. "This man sees something special in you. Do not question it. Just accept it and see where it leads." "But why would he want to spend time with me?" Joseph asked, genuinely puzzled. "I am nobody special." "You are wrong about that," Mrs. Svobodova said firmly. "You are very special. You just do not see it, because you are humble. But clearly Mr. Dvorak sees it. He sees your character, your integrity. Those qualities are rare, Joseph, especially in his world where everyone wants something, where people are often dishonest and selfish. You are different. You are genuine. That is valuable." Joseph was not convinced, but he called Dvorak's office that evening and spoke with Helena, the assistant, who scheduled a coffee meeting for the following Saturday morning at a small cafe near the city center. Joseph spent the rest of the week feeling anxious, changing his mind a dozen times about whether to go, finally deciding that he would keep the appointment because backing out now would be cowardly and rude. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the sun breaking through clouds that had hung over the city for days. Joseph dressed mournfully in his good clothes, took the tram into the center, found the cafe without difficulty. It was a modest place, not fancy or expensive looking, with small tables and comfortable chairs, the smell of fresh coffee and pastries filling the warm air. Dvorak was already there, sitting at a corner table, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed and approachable than he had in his office. He stood when he saw Joseph, smiling warmly, shaking his hand, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Novak. Please sit. What would you like to drink?" They ordered coffee and sat looking at each other for a moment, both seeming uncertain how to begin. Finally, Dvorak leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I wanted to talk to you again, because our first meeting affected me," he said. "You made me think about things I had not thought about in a long time. About values, about what really matters in life. I have spent 20 years building my business, making money, accumulating things, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what my own father taught me, that success without integrity is worthless, that how you treat people matters more than how much you own. You reminded me of that. You reminded me of who I wanted to be when I was younger, before I got caught up in the game of business and money." Joseph did not know what to say to this confession. "I just did what my father taught me," he said finally. "Nothing more." "But that is everything," Dvorak said quietly. "That is what I have lost, and what I want to find again." They talked for 2 hours that morning, the conversation flowing more easily than Joseph would have thought possible between two men from such different circumstances. Dvorak asked about Joseph's life, his childhood on the farm, his years of marriage to Maria, his work at the school, his relationship with Petra and Carolina. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, never seeming bored or impatient, treating Joseph's simple stories as if they mattered, as if they were valuable and worth hearing. In turn, Joseph learned about Dvorak's life, about how he had built his construction company from nothing, working 16-hour days for years, sacrificing time with his family, missing his children's school events and birthdays, always chasing the next contract, the next deal, the next opportunity to grow bigger and make more money. He had achieved success by any conventional measure, Dvorak admitted, but somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with the values his own father had taught him, values not unlike those Joseph's father had instilled, about honesty and hard work, and treating people with respect. "I have employees who are afraid of me," Dvorak said quietly, staring into his coffee cup. "I have business associates who smile to my face but would betray me in a heartbeat if it served their interests. I have built an empire, but I am not sure I like the person I became in the process." "You are still a good man," Joseph said. "I can see that. You were kind to me when you did not have to be. You helped my daughter when you had no obligation to do so. Those actions speak to your character." Dvorak looked up at him, something vulnerable in his eyes. "I want to be better," he said. "I want to remember what matters. Talking to you helps me do that." They parted that day with plans to meet again, and over the following weeks, these meetings became a regular occurrence, every Saturday morning at the same cafe, 2 hours of conversation over coffee and pastries. It was an unlikely friendship, the wealthy businessman and the poor janitor, but it was real, and it mattered to both of them. Joseph found himself looking forward to these meetings, finding in Dvorak someone who saw him not as invisible or insignificant, but as a person worth knowing, worth spending time with. And Dvorak seemed to find in Joseph something he had been missing, a kind of grounding, a connection to values and perspectives that his own life had moved away from. One Saturday in early December, Dvorak arrived at the cafe with an envelope. "I want to give you something," he said, handing it to Joseph. Joseph opened it carefully and found an embossed invitation. "You are cordially invited to the Dvorak Construction Annual Christmas Celebration," it read, with a date and location, a luxury hotel in the city center. "Please bring your family." Joseph looked up, confused. "I do not understand." "I want you to come to our company party," Dvorak explained. "I want you to meet my wife and children. I want my employees to meet you. I have told them about you, about what you did, and many of them want to thank you for reminding all of us what integrity looks like." Joseph felt a wave of anxiety. "I do not belong at such an event," he said. "I am not part of your world. I would not fit in." "You belong anywhere I invite you," Dvorak said firmly, "and you fit in better than most of the people who will be there, because you are genuine and honest and kind. Please come. It would mean a great deal to me." Joseph wanted to refuse, knew he would be uncomfortable surrounded by wealthy, successful people in their expensive clothes. But he could see that this mattered to Dvorak, that his new friend was asking for something important. And perhaps Petra and Karolina would enjoy it, he thought. A fancy party with good food and music, a brief escape from their difficult circumstances. He agreed and spent the next 2 weeks worrying about it, trying to figure out what he would wear, how he would act, what he would say to these people who inhabited a world so different from his own. Petra borrowed a dress from a friend, simple but elegant, and found a pretty outfit for Karolina at a second-hand shop. Joseph wore his one suit, pressed and brushed until it looked as good as it possibly could, his shoes polished to a shine, his grey hair neatly combed. They took the tram together to the hotel on the evening of the party. Karolina excited and chattering, Petra nervous but hopeful, Joseph silent and tense. The hotel lobby was decorated beautifully for Christmas, a massive tree covered in lights and ornaments, garlands draped along the walls, candles flickering on every surface. Well-dressed people filled the space, laughing and talking, holding glasses of wine, the atmosphere festive and warm. Joseph felt immediately out of place, his old suit shabby compared to the designer clothes around him, but Petra took his arm and squeezed it gently. "We belong here because we were invited," she whispered. "Hold your head up, Papa. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Dvorak appeared within minutes, cutting through the crowd to greet them, his face lit with genuine pleasure. "Joseph," he said warmly, shaking his hand, then turning to Petra and Karolina. "You must be Petra, and this beautiful young lady is Karolina. I am so glad you could come." He introduced them to his wife, Elena, a gracious woman in her late 40s, with kind eyes and a warm smile, and to his children, a son and daughter in their late teens, who greeted Joseph and his family politely, with the easy confidence of young people who had grown up with privilege. Then Dvorak did something Joseph had not expected. He clinked a glass to get everyone's attention, and when the room quieted, he began to speak, his voice carrying across the space. "Friends and colleagues," he said, "I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is Joseph Novak, and many of you have heard me talk about him over the past few weeks. Joseph is the man who found my wallet and returned it to me when he could have kept it, when he desperately needed the money it contained, when no one would have known if he had made a different choice. Joseph represents something I want all of us to remember as we celebrate this Christmas season. He represents integrity, honesty, and decency. He represents the kind of character that we should all aspire to, the kind of values that matter more than money or success or any of the things we usually measure ourselves by. Joseph, I am honored to call you my friend. Thank you for reminding me what it means to be a good man." The room erupted in applause, and Joseph felt his face burning, tears stinging his eyes, overwhelmed by the public recognition, by the respect and admiration he saw in the faces around him. People came up to him throughout the evening, shaking his hand, thanking him, telling him their own stories about honesty and integrity, about times they had faced similar choices, about how his example had inspired them. Petra stood beside him, holding Karolina's hand, her own face glowing with pride and happiness. "This is your night, Papa," she whispered at one point. "Enjoy it. You deserve this recognition." But Joseph felt uncomfortable with all the attention, felt that he had simply done what anyone should do, that there was nothing heroic or extraordinary about basic honesty. Still, he could not deny that it felt good to be seen, to be valued, to matter in the eyes of others. For so many years he had been invisible, just another old man doing humble work, easily overlooked and quickly forgotten. Tonight he was visible. Tonight he mattered. And while he knew this recognition would fade, knew that tomorrow he would return to his normal life. For this one evening, he allowed himself to feel proud, to stand a little taller, to accept the gratitude and respect that people offered him. The party lasted late into the night, with dinner and dancing and speeches with laughter and music and celebration. Karolina danced with Dvorak's son, her face radiant with joy. Petra talked with Elena and found in her a kindred spirit, another woman who understood the challenges of raising children and maintaining hope in difficult times. And Joseph sat at the table of honor beside Dvorak, watching it all, feeling a contentment he had not felt in years, a sense that perhaps his life, humble as it was, had meaning and value, that his choices mattered, that doing right had consequences beyond what he could see or understand. When they finally left, taking a taxi home that Dvorak insisted on paying for, Joseph sat in the back seat between his daughter and granddaughter, all of them quiet, processing the extraordinary evening. Karolina fell asleep against his shoulder, and Joseph held her gently, looking out the window at the city lights passing by, thinking about how strange life was, how one simple decision, one moment of choosing right over easy, had led to this unexpected friendship, to this night of recognition and celebration, to a feeling of being valued that he would treasure for the rest of his days. January arrived with snow and bitter cold, the city wrapped in white, the streets treacherous with ice. Joseph returned to his routine, the memory of the Christmas party fading like a pleasant dream, his life settling back into its familiar patterns. He still met Dvorak every Saturday, their friendship deepening with each conversation. But the rest of the week belonged to work and worry, to the never-ending struggle to make ends meet, to the constant concern about Petra's health. The tests had been completed using the money Dvorak had given him, and they were waiting for results, waiting to hear what was wrong with her, what treatment she would need, whether the news would be good or devastating. Joseph tried not to think about it too much, tried to stay positive for Petra's sake, but at night when he lay alone in his narrow bed, fear crept in, like the cold seeping through the old windows, making his chest tight and his sleep troubled. Then, on a grey Tuesday morning in the middle of January, Joseph received a phone call at work from Petra's doctor, asking him to come to the hospital as soon as possible. There was urgency in the doctor's voice, a tone that made Joseph's blood run cold. He told Mr. Hlavacek he had a family emergency and left immediately, practically running to the tram stop, his heart pounding, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. At the hospital, he found Petra in a consultation room with her doctor, a serious-looking woman in her 50s named Dr. Novotna. Petra's face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Joseph sat beside her and took her hand, looking at the doctor with dread. "Tell me," he said simply. Dr. Novotna spoke gently but directly. "The tests show that Petra has a rare condition affecting her liver and kidneys. It is serious but treatable. However, the treatment she needs is not available here in the country. She would need to go to Germany, to a specialist clinic that handles these cases. The surgery is complex and expensive. Very expensive." "How expensive?" Joseph asked, though he already knew the answer would be more than he could possibly afford. 800,000 crowns, Dr. Novotna said quietly. "The clinic requires payment up front. Without this surgery, Petra's condition will continue to deteriorate. I am sorry to be blunt, but you need to understand the urgency. She has perhaps 6 months, maybe less." The room seemed to tilt around Joseph. 800,000 crowns. It was an impossible sum, more money than he would earn in 15 years of work, more money than he could imagine having. He looked at Petra, saw the fear and resignation in her eyes, saw that she had already accepted that this treatment was beyond reach, that she was going to die. "No," he thought fiercely, No, this cannot be how it ends. There has to be a way. But even as he thought it, he knew there was no way. He had no savings, no assets, nothing of value to sell. His apartment was rented, his possessions worthless. He could try to borrow from the bank, but no bank would lend such an amount to an old janitor with no collateral. He could ask friends and family, but they were all struggling themselves, had nothing to spare. The weight of helplessness crushed down on him, making it hard to breathe. "Papa," Petra said softly, squeezing his hand. "It is all right. We knew it might be bad news." Joseph shook his head, unable to speak, tears streaming down his face. He had survived Maria's death, had found a way to keep going, but the thought of losing Petra too, of watching his daughter die when there was treatment available but just out of reach because of money, was more than he could bear. They left the hospital together, walking slowly through the cold streets, neither of them knowing what to say. Joseph took Petra back to her apartment, made her tea, sat with her until she fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from crying. Then he went home and sat at his kitchen table in the darkness, staring at nothing, his mind empty of thought, his heart empty of hope. The next 3 days passed in a blur of desperate attempts to find money. Joseph went to 3 different banks, each one rejecting his loan application within minutes. He called distant relatives he had not spoken to in years, asking if they could help, receiving sympathetic refusals. He looked into selling his few possessions, but they were worth almost nothing. He even considered going to loan sharks, dangerous men who charged criminal interest rates, but even they would not lend him such an amount without collateral. By Friday evening, Joseph was defeated, sitting in his apartment, staring at the bills spread across his table, doing calculations that never worked out, no matter how many times he tried. He thought about praying, but the words would not come. He thought about Maria, about what she would tell him to do, but he could not hear her voice anymore, could not feel her presence. He was alone with his failure, with the terrible knowledge that his daughter was going to die because he was too poor, too insignificant, too powerless to save her. On Saturday morning, he almost did not go to meet Dvorak, felt he could not face his friend's kindness when his world was collapsing, but he forced himself to go anyway, needing the distraction, needing to pretend for a few hours that life was normal. Dvorak knew immediately that something was wrong. "Joseph," he said, concern evident in his voice. "What happened?" Joseph tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He sat down heavily, his hands shaking, tears burning behind his eyes. After a long moment, he managed to tell Dvorak everything, about Petra's diagnosis, about the surgery she needed in Germany, about the 800,000 crowns he did not have and could never get, about the 6 months she had left to live without treatment. Dvorak listened in silence, his face growing more serious with each word. When Joseph finished, they sat quietly for a moment, the cafe noise flowing around them, other people's laughter and conversation, a strange contrast to the heaviness at their table. "I will pay for it," Dvorak said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I will pay for the surgery." Joseph looked up sharply, shocked. "No," he said immediately. "No, I cannot let you do that. It is too much. I already owe you so much." "You owe me nothing," Dvorak said. "And this is not charity, Joseph. This is what friends do for each other. They help when help is needed." "It is too much money," Joseph repeated, shaking his head. 800,000 crowns. I could never repay you. I do not want you to repay me, Dvorak said. I want your daughter to live. That is all the repayment I need. But Joseph could not accept it, could not allow himself to take such an enormous gift. His pride and sense of dignity warring with his desperation to save Petra. I cannot, he said, his voice breaking. I cannot take charity like this. I am not a beggar. Then do not think of it as charity, Dvorak said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. Think of it as an investment. Come work for me, Joseph. I need someone I can trust to oversee maintenance and facilities at my company buildings. Someone honest, someone reliable, someone who treats work with dignity and respect. The position pays well, much better than you earn now. You will earn this money, you will work for it, and we will simply advance you what you need now for Petra's surgery. You can pay me back over time through your work. But that would take years, Joseph said. Decades, maybe. So what? Dvorak replied. We have time. You are 62, not 90. You can work for me for as long as you are able. And even if you cannot work long enough to repay it all, so what? Life is not a balance sheet, Joseph. Sometimes we give because we can, because it is right, because it matters. You gave me back my wallet when you desperately needed what was in it. You gave me a gift of integrity that reminded me who I want to be. Let me give you this gift in return. Let me help save your daughter's life. Joseph sat very still, processing this offer, this impossible, miraculous offer that could change everything, that could save Petra. Part of him wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain his independence and pride, wanted to handle his own problems without help. But another part of him, the part that loved his daughter more than his own pride, the part that wanted desperately for her to live, knew that this was not a time for false pride. This was a time to accept grace, to let someone help, to put aside his ego and do what needed to be done to save Petra's life. Are you certain? He asked finally, his voice barely a whisper. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? I have never been more certain of anything, Dvorak said firmly. Your daughter deserves to live, Joseph, and you deserve help. Let me do this. Please. Joseph looked at his friend's face, saw the sincerity there, saw the determination and kindness, saw that this offer came from genuine care and not from pity. He thought about Petra, about Karolina growing up without her mother, about all the years of life that Petra still deserved to have. He thought about his own father, about what he would say in this moment, and he heard his father's voice clearly in his mind. Accept the blessing, son. Accept it with gratitude and grace. Joseph nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face now, unable to speak. Dvorak reached across the table and gripped his hand. It will be all right, he said quietly. We will get through this together. I will call the clinic today. We will arrange everything. Petra will have her surgery, and she will recover, and she will live. Trust me. And Joseph did trust him, trusted this man who had started as a stranger, become a friend, and was now offering to save his daughter's life. They sat together in that cafe for a long time, holding hands across the table, two men from different worlds connected by something stronger than money or status or circumstance, connected by a bond forged in integrity and deepened in compassion. When Joseph finally left to go tell Petra the news, to give her hope where there had been none, he felt as if he was walking through a dream, as if the world had shifted on its axis, and everything had changed. He had gone to that cafe expecting nothing, had arrived defeated and hopeless, and was leaving with a miracle. He did not understand why this was happening, why Dvorak was willing to do so much for him, why his simple act of honesty in returning a wallet had led to this moment where his daughter's life hung in the balance and a near stranger was offering to save her. But he accepted it with gratitude and wonder, accepted that sometimes grace arrives in unexpected forms, that sometimes help comes from the most unlikely places, that sometimes a single decision to do right opens doors you never imagined existed. Joseph walked through the cold streets toward Petra's apartment, his heart full for the first time in days, ready to tell his daughter that she was going to live. When Joseph arrived at Petra's apartment with the news, she was sitting on the couch with Karolina, reading her a story, trying to maintain some normalcy even as their world crumbled around them. She looked up when he entered, saw something in his face that made her stop reading mid-sentence. "Papa," she said, standing quickly. "What is it? What happened?" Joseph sat down beside them, taking both their hands in his, hardly able to believe the words he was about to speak. "You are going to have the surgery," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Mr. Dvorak is paying for it. He is giving me a job at his company, a good job with better pay, and he is advancing the money for your treatment. You are going to Germany. You are going to get well." Petra stared at him in stunned silence for a long moment, her face blank with shock. Then she collapsed against him, sobbing so hard her whole body shook, clinging to him like a child, releasing all the fear and grief and resignation she had been holding inside since the diagnosis. Karolina wrapped her arms around both of them, not fully understanding what was happening, but knowing it was something important, something good. They held each other for a long time, crying together, laughing together, the relief and joy so intense it was almost painful. "I cannot believe it," Petra kept saying through her tears. "I cannot believe someone would do this for us." "Why would he do this, Papa? Why would he help us so much?" "Because he is a good man," Joseph said simply. "And because sometimes, when you do the right thing, good things come back to you in ways you never expected." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity and preparation. Dvorak was true to his word, moving quickly to arrange everything. He contacted the clinic in Germany, sent Petra's medical records, scheduled the surgery for early February, paid the deposit immediately. He had his lawyers draw up employment contracts for Joseph, making everything official and legal, ensuring that Joseph would not feel like he was accepting charity, but earning his way. The position was real, Dvorak assured him, not something created just to give him money. The company genuinely needed someone trustworthy to oversee facilities management across their various properties. Joseph gave notice at the school, a bittersweet moment after 30 years of service. Mrs. Svobodova cried when he told her, hugging him fiercely. "You deserve this. Joseph," she said, "you deserve good things to happen to you." Mr. Hlavacek shook his hand solemnly, his stern face softening into something like pride. "You always did your work with dignity," he said. "That is rare these days. You will be missed." The teachers and staff threw Joseph a small going-away party in the staff room, presenting him with a card signed by everyone and a modest gift. Several people made short speeches about how Joseph had been a steady, reliable presence in their daily lives, how his quiet kindness had made the school a better place. Joseph was moved by their words, had not realized how much he mattered to these people who he saw as his colleagues and friends. He would miss this place, these familiar hallways, this routine that had structured his days for 3 decades. But he was also ready for something new, ready to step into a role where he could provide better for his family. Dvorak gave Joseph a tour of the company facilities, introduced him to the maintenance staff, explained what the job would entail. It was more responsibility than Joseph had ever had, overseeing multiple buildings, managing budgets, coordinating repairs and improvements. But Dvorak expressed complete confidence in his ability to handle it. "You have managed the school building for 30 years, he said. "You know how to maintain facilities, how to work with people, how to solve problems. The rest you will learn. And you have something more important than technical knowledge. You have integrity. My people will respect you because you respect the work, and you respect them." Joseph started his new job the first week of February, arriving early every morning just as he always had, treating his new responsibilities with the same diligence he had brought to cleaning classrooms. The maintenance staff, initially skeptical of this older man, brought in from outside, quickly warmed to him when they saw that he was not above getting his hands dirty, that he listened to their concerns, that he treated them with respect and fairness. Within days they were coming to him with problems and questions, seeking his advice, appreciating his calm, thoughtful approach to challenges. The salary was more than Joseph had dared hope for, nearly 3 times what he had earned at the school. For the first time in his life, he could pay his bills without constant worry, could buy groceries without calculating every crown, could afford small luxuries like new clothes or a meal at a restaurant. He opened a savings account, something he had never been able to do before, determined to be financially responsible, to prove himself worthy of this opportunity Dvorak had given him. But even as he settled into his new job, his mind remained focused on Petra, on the approaching surgery, on the hope and fear that battled within him every hour of every day. Meanwhile, Petra prepared for her journey to Germany, gathering medical records, arranging for Karolina to stay with Joseph during her absence, packing a small bag with essentials. Dr. Novotna helped coordinate with the German clinic, ensuring that all necessary information was transferred, that the doctors there would be fully prepared when Petra arrived. Dvorak arranged for a comfortable flight and accommodation near the clinic, insisting that Petra should not have to worry about logistics or expenses, that she should focus entirely on her recovery. "I owe you more than I can ever repay," Petra told Dvorak when she met him at his office to thank him personally. "You are giving me my life back. You are giving my daughter her mother. I do not have words for what this means." "Just get well," Dvorak said simply. "That is all the thanks I need. Come back healthy and watch your daughter grow up. That will be enough." On the day Petra was to leave for Germany, Joseph and Karolina accompanied her to the airport. It was a cold, grey February morning, snow falling lightly, the world quiet and hushed. They checked in at the airline counter, went through security together as far as they were allowed, then stood in the departure area saying their goodbyes. Joseph held his daughter close, fighting back tears, trying to be strong for her sake. "You are going to do wonderfully," he said. "The doctors are excellent. You will have the surgery and recover and come back to us healthy and whole." "I am scared, Papa," Petra admitted quietly. "What if something goes wrong? What if I do not wake up from the surgery?" "Nothing will go wrong," Joseph said firmly, though he felt the same fears. "You are strong. You are a fighter. You are going to survive this and live to see Carolina graduate from university, get married, give you grandchildren. You have so much life ahead of you still. Promise me, you will take care of Carolina, Petra said. Promise me that if something happens, you will make sure she knows how much I love her. I promise, Joseph said, his voice breaking. But nothing is going to happen. You are going to come back to us. Petra knelt down to hug Carolina, who clung to her mother with fierce determination. I love you, Mama, the little girl said. Come back soon. I love you too, sweetheart, Petra said, smoothing her daughter's hair. Be good for Grandpa. Help him, and make me proud. I will, Carolina promised solemnly. They watched Petra walk toward her gate, saw her turn back once to wave, her face brave despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. Then she disappeared into the crowd and was gone. Joseph took Carolina's hand, and they walked slowly out of the airport, neither of them speaking, both lost in their own thoughts and fears. The waiting began then, the long, difficult days of hoping and praying and trying not to imagine the worst. Joseph went to work each day, throwing himself into his responsibilities, keeping busy to avoid dwelling on his worries. At night he cooked simple dinners for Carolina, helped her with homework, read her stories before bed, trying to maintain stability and routine, even as his heart ached with fear. Carolina was brave, rarely crying, but Joseph could see the worry in her eyes, could feel how tightly she hugged him at bedtime, seeking comfort and reassurance. They talked to Petra by phone when they could, brief calls from the hospital where she tried to sound cheerful and optimistic. The surgery was scheduled for the end of her first week there, after preliminary tests and consultations with the medical team. I am in good hands, Papa, she told him during one call. The doctors here are wonderful. They are confident the surgery will be successful. Joseph wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that everything would work out. But he had lived long enough to know that life offered no guarantees, that good people suffered and died despite the best medical care. That hope was sometimes just a fragile thing that could shatter in an instant. He found himself praying more than he had in years, sitting alone in his apartment late at night, talking to Maria, asking her to watch over their daughter, to intercede somehow, to ensure that Petra survived. Dvorak called him several times, checking on how he was doing, offering support and encouragement. I spoke with the clinic director, Dvorak told him. They are very optimistic about Petra's case. The surgeon who will operate is one of the best in Europe. She is in excellent hands, Joseph. Thank you, Joseph said, meaning it with all his heart. Thank you for everything. You have given us hope. You have given us a chance. The night before the surgery, Joseph could not sleep at all, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind filled with memories of Petra as a little girl, her first day of school, her graduation, her wedding, the day Carolina was born. He thought about all the moments they had shared, all the love and laughter and ordinary days that make up a life. He thought about how fragile it all was, how quickly it could be taken away, how precious every moment truly was. At dawn, he got up and made coffee, sitting at his kitchen table, watching the sun rise over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was going to be a long day, a day of waiting and hoping, a day that would determine whether Petra lived or died, whether his family remained intact or was shattered by loss. Joseph had never been particularly religious, had drifted away from church after Maria died, But now he found himself praying with desperate intensity, offering every bargain he could think of, promising to be better, to do more, to give everything if only Petra could be spared. He went to work because he had to, because staying home would drive him mad. But he accomplished little, his mind elsewhere, his phone always in his pocket, waiting for it to ring with news. His co-workers noticed his distraction and left him alone, respecting his worry. At noon, Dvorak came to find him, putting a hand on his shoulder. "The surgery started an hour ago," he said quietly. "It will take several hours. Try to stay calm, Joseph. Try to have faith." Joseph nodded, unable to speak. They stood together in silence for a moment, two friends sharing a burden. And then Dvorak left, and Joseph returned to his waiting, to the slow torture of minutes passing like hours, to the prayer that never stopped running through his mind. Please let her live. Please let her live. Please let her live. The phone call came at 6 in the evening, just as Joseph was preparing dinner for Karolina in his small kitchen. The sudden ring made him jump, his heart lurching in his chest. He wiped his hands quickly on a towel and picked up the receiver with trembling fingers, pressing it to his ear. "Hello," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Novak," a woman's voice said in accented but clear English. "This is Dr. Müller from the clinic in Germany. I am calling about your daughter, Petra." Joseph's legs went weak, and he sat down heavily in the nearest chair, his free hand gripping the edge of the table. "Yes," he managed to say. "How is she?" "The surgery went very well," Dr. Müller said, and Joseph felt the world tilt back into place, felt air rush into his lungs as if he had been holding his breath for hours. "We were able to remove the damaged tissue and repair the affected organs. The procedure took longer than expected because the damage was more extensive than the scans showed, but we are confident we addressed everything. Petra is in recovery now. She is stable and her vital signs are strong. She is going to be all right, Mr. Novak." Joseph could not speak for a moment, overwhelmed by relief so intense it was almost painful. Tears streamed down his face, and he covered his mouth with his hand, trying to control the sobs that wanted to break free. "Thank you," he finally whispered. "Thank you so much." "She will need to remain here for approximately 4 weeks," Dr. Müller continued. "We want to monitor her recovery closely, ensure there are no complications, give her body time to heal properly. But all indications are that she will make a full recovery. She should be able to return to normal activities within 3 to 6 months." "Can I speak with her?" Joseph asked. "When can I speak with her?" "She is still sedated from the surgery," Dr. Müller said gently. "But she should be awake in a few hours. I will have her call you as soon as she is able. In the meantime, please do not worry. She did beautifully. She is going to be fine." After the call ended, Joseph sat motionless for several minutes, the receiver still in his hand, tears running unchecked down his face. Karolina appeared in the doorway, her young face anxious. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "is Mama okay?" Joseph looked at his granddaughter and smiled through his tears, opening his arms. "She is okay, sweetheart," he said. "The surgery went well. Your Mama is going to be fine. She is going to come home to us." Karolina ran into his arms and they held each other, both crying now, releasing all the fear and tension they had been carrying. Joseph sent up a silent prayer of gratitude, thanking God or fate or whatever force had brought them through this crisis, thanking Dvorak for making it possible, thanking the doctors for their skill, thanking Mariah wherever she was for watching over their daughter. The phone rang again an hour later, and Joseph answered it immediately. It was Dvorak. "I just heard from the clinic," he said, his voice warm with relief and happiness. "Joseph, she made it. Petra is going to be all right." "Yes," Joseph said, crying again, though he had thought he had no tears left. "Yes, she is going to be all right." "Thank you, Martin. Thank you for giving her this chance. Thank you for saving her life." "You are welcome, my friend," Dvorak said simply. "I am so happy for you, for all of you. This is wonderful news." Late that evening, past 10 o'clock, the phone rang a third time, and this time it was Petra herself, her voice weak and hoarse, but unmistakably alive. "Papa," she said, and Joseph heard the tears in her voice. "I am okay. I made it through. I am going to live." "I know, sweetheart," Joseph said, his own voice breaking. "I know. You were so strong, so brave. I am so proud of you." "I was so scared, Papa," Petra admitted. "I thought I might not wake up. I thought I might never see you and Carolina again." "But you did wake up," Joseph said firmly. "You survived. You are going to come home and watch Carolina grow up and have a long, beautiful life ahead of you." "I love you, Papa," Petra whispered. "I love you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for never giving up on me." "I love you too," Joseph said. "Rest now. Get strong. We will be here waiting for you when you come home." After they said goodbye, Joseph sat in his darkened apartment, the only light coming from the street lamp outside his window, feeling a peace he had not felt in months. The worst was over. Petra had survived. She was going to recover. Their family was going to be whole again. He thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, about finding the wallet, about meeting Dvorak, about the series of small choices and chance encounters that had led to this miracle. If he had kept that money, if he had made a different choice that November evening, Petra would be dying right now. But he had chosen honesty over need, had chosen integrity over survival. And somehow, impossibly, that choice had saved his daughter's life. The next 4 weeks passed in a strange state of suspended reality for Joseph. Each day, blending into the next in a haze of work and waiting and gradual acceptance that the miracle was real, that Petra truly was going to survive. He spoke with her by phone every evening, hearing her voice grow stronger day by day, listening to her describe her recovery, her conversations with the doctors, her growing optimism about the future. She sent photographs through the hospital staff, pictures of herself sitting up in bed, smiling despite her pale face and the medical equipment surrounding her. Pictures that Joseph studied for hours, memorizing every detail, treasuring this evidence that his daughter was alive. At work, Joseph threw himself into his new responsibilities with renewed energy and purpose, wanting to prove himself worthy of Dvorak's faith and generosity, wanting to earn every crown of the salary that was making it possible for Petra to receive care. His co-workers noticed the change in him, the lightness that had replaced the worry that had shadowed his face for so long. They congratulated him when he shared the news about Petra's successful surgery, genuinely happy for him, their warmth and kindness reminding Joseph that goodness existed in ordinary people everywhere, not just in extraordinary circumstances. Dvorak stopped by to see him regularly, checking on how things were going, listening to Joseph's reports about Petra's progress, sharing in his relief and joy. Their friendship deepened during these weeks, moving beyond the unusual circumstances of their meeting into something more solid and lasting. They discovered shared interests, similar values, a mutual respect that transcended their different backgrounds. Dvorak confided in Joseph about struggles in his own family, about his teenage son, who was rebelling and making poor choices, about his fear that he had failed as a father by working too much and being absent during crucial years. Joseph listened and offered what wisdom he could, drawing on his own experience raising Petra, speaking honestly about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. "You have time to repair the relationship," Joseph told him. "Your son is young. He needs to know you care, that you see him, that he matters more to you than your business. Show him that through your actions, not just your words. Spend time with him. Listen to him. Be present. It is never too late to become the father you want to be." Dvorak took this advice to heart, began leaving work earlier to have dinner with his family, started attending his son's football matches, made conscious efforts to be more available and engaged. Slowly, the tension between them began to ease. The walls his son had built started to come down. "Thank you," Dvorak told Joseph one day. "Thank you for reminding me what really matters. I was so focused on building my empire that I was losing my family. You helped me see that before it was too late." "You would have figured it out eventually," Joseph said. "You are a good man. You just needed to remember your priorities." At home, Joseph cared for Karolina with patient devotion, making sure she did her homework, preparing her meals, taking her to school each morning, and picking her up each afternoon. They established routines and rituals, little traditions that brought comfort and stability during this time of uncertainty. They cooked together on weekends, baked cookies that they packaged and sent to Petra in Germany, watched old movies on television, took walks through the park on Sunday afternoons. Karolina blossomed under Joseph's care. Her initial worry about her mother gradually replaced by hope and confidence that everything was going to be all right. She talked about Petra constantly, making plans for what they would do when her mother came home, drawing pictures to decorate her mother's apartment, counting down the days until the reunion. Finally, in early March, the call came that Joseph had been waiting for. Petra was being released from the clinic, cleared to travel home, pronounced recovered enough to continue her healing in familiar surroundings. Dvorak arranged the travel once again, insisting on paying for everything despite Joseph's protests. "She is family now," Dvorak said simply. "Your family is my family. Let me do this." On the day of Petra's arrival, Joseph and Karolina went to the airport hours early, too excited to wait at home, too eager to see her, to risk being late. They stood at the arrivals gate, watching every passenger that emerged, Karolina bouncing on her toes with anticipation, Joseph feeling his heart race with each passing minute. And then there she was, walking slowly but steadily through the doorway, thinner than before, moving carefully, but alive and smiling, her eyes searching the crowd until they found Joseph and Karolina. "Mama!" Karolina shrieked, running toward her mother. Petra knelt down carefully and caught her daughter in her arms, holding her close, both of them crying. Joseph approached more slowly, giving them their moment, his own vision blurred with tears. Then Petra reached out for him, and he embraced them both, his daughter and granddaughter, his whole world contained in this circle of arms. "Welcome home," he whispered. "Welcome home, sweetheart." They stood together in the busy airport, people flowing around them, unnoticed and uncaring of the miracle that had just occurred. the reunion that represented the culmination of months of fear and hope, of struggle and grace, of one man's choice to do right, and the unexpected cascade of blessings that followed. Joseph closed his eyes and held his family close, feeling Maria's presence somehow, feeling that she was smiling, that she approved, that she knew their daughter was safe. This was what mattered, he thought. Not money or success or recognition, but this: love, family, being together. Everything else was just details. 3 months passed, spring arrived with its promise of renewal, and Petra grew stronger every day. She moved back into her apartment with Carolina, resumed a careful version of her normal life, attended follow-up appointments where doctors expressed satisfaction with her recovery. The color returned to her face, the light came back into her eyes, and slowly the shadow of death that had hung over her lifted and disappeared. She could not work yet, the doctors said, needed more time to fully heal. But that was all right because Joseph's new salary was enough to support them all comfortably while she recovered. For the first time in her adult life, Petra could rest without financial panic, could focus on her health without the constant worry of unpaid bills and mounting debt. Joseph continued his work at Dvorak Construction, proving himself capable and trustworthy, earning the respect of everyone he worked with. He approached his responsibilities with the same diligence he had brought to cleaning classrooms, the same attention to detail and commitment to excellence. Dvorak praised his work regularly, told him he had made an excellent decision in hiring him, that the company was running more smoothly with Joseph overseeing facilities. But more than employer and employee, they remained friends, still meeting for coffee on Saturday mornings, still sharing their lives and struggles and joys. Dvorak's relationship with his son improved dramatically, the young man responding to his father's increased presence and attention, the distance between them closing as they spent more time together. "I owe you for that, too," Dvorak told Joseph. "You helped me save my family, just as I helped you save yours." "We helped each other," Joseph corrected gently. "That is what friendship means." One sunny Saturday in late May, Dvorak arrived at their usual cafe with a wrapped package. He set it on the table between them with a smile that was both shy and proud. "I want to give you something," he said. "A symbol of our friendship." Joseph unwrapped it carefully, revealing a picture frame, expensive and beautifully crafted. Inside the frame was a single banknote, one of the bills from Dvorak's wallet, mounted and preserved, with a small brass plaque beneath it that read, "Integrity is priceless." In memory of the day Joseph Novak returned what was not his and changed 2 lives forever. Joseph stared at it, his throat tight with emotion, unable to speak for a long moment. "This is," he finally managed, "this is beautiful. Thank you. Hang it somewhere you will see it every day," Dvorak said. "And remember that what you did mattered. Remember that your choice to be honest when you could have been dishonest created ripples that spread far beyond what you could see. You saved your daughter, yes, but you also saved me. You reminded me who I wanted to be. You gave me back my values. That is worth more than any amount of money." They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 men who had found in each other something rare and precious, a friendship built on mutual respect and shared values, a connection that transcended the circumstances of their meeting and would last for the rest of their lives. That evening, Joseph hung the framed banknote on the wall of his small apartment, where he would see it every morning when he woke, and every evening when he came home from work. It became a reminder not of what he had done, but of what was possible when you lived with integrity, when you chose right over easy, when you trusted that goodness would somehow find its way back to you. Petra and Karolina came for dinner that night, a weekly tradition they had established, and they all cooked together in Joseph's tiny kitchen, laughing and talking, the apartment filled with warmth and life. After dinner, as they sat around the small table drinking tea, Petra looked at her father with tears in her eyes. "I never thanked you properly, Papa," she said quietly. "For everything. For raising me with values that kept you honest, even when you were desperate. For working so hard, your whole life, to take care of me. For finding Mr. Dvorak's wallet and returning it when you could have solved all our problems by keeping it. For being the kind of man who would rather suffer than compromise his integrity. You saved my life, Papa. Not just by getting me the surgery, but by being who you are, by teaching me through your example what it means to live with honor." Joseph reached across the table and took her hand. "You are my daughter," he said simply. "You are my whole world. I would do anything for you. But I did not do anything extraordinary. I just did what was right." "That is extraordinary, Papa," Petra said, smiling through her tears. "In this world, doing what is right when it costs you something, that is the most extraordinary thing of all." Karolina, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Joseph looked at his granddaughter, this beautiful child who carried within her the future, who represented hope and possibility and all the potential of the next generation. "Then be honest, sweetheart," he said. "Be kind, work hard, treat people with respect. Do the right thing even when it is difficult. That is all you need to do to be like me. That is all anyone needs to do to live a good life." They stayed late that evening, talking and laughing, sharing stories and memories, building new moments to treasure. When Petra and Karolina finally left, walking hand in hand down the street toward the tram stop, Joseph stood at his window watching them go, his heart full. He thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, about the wallet lying under that desk, about the choice he had made, about all the unexpected blessings that had followed. He thought about Maria, about how proud she would be of the family they had built together, about how their values lived on in Petra and would continue in Karolina. He thought about his father, about the lessons that had shaped his life, about the pocket knife he still carried every day as a reminder of where he came from and what he believed. "Your character is what you do when no one is watching," his father had said. "Do right even when nobody is watching." Joseph had done that, had stayed true to himself when it would have been so easy to make a different choice, and somehow, mysteriously, wonderfully, that choice had led to this. To Petra alive and healthy, to Karolina happy and secure, to friendship with Martin Dvorak, to a better job and financial stability, to this moment of peace and gratitude and love. He did not understand exactly how it had all worked out, could not trace the invisible threads that connected his choice to these outcomes, but he accepted it with wonder and humility. Accepted that sometimes goodness is rewarded in ways you never expect, that sometimes doing right opens doors you never knew existed. As Joseph prepared for bed that night, he looked once more at the framed banknote hanging on his wall, at the brass plaque beneath it. Integrity is priceless. Yes, he thought. Yes, it is. And it was worth more than all the money in the world.